It was supposed to be an ordinary night, just another shift, another routine patrol, another quiet evening in a small town. But when Officer Daniel Mercer arrived at the desolate stretch of highway just outside of Crestwood, he knew instantly that something was very, very wrong. The headlights of an abandoned sedan flickered weakly in the darkness, its engine still humming, as if its driver had vanished into thin air. A single door hung open, the interior light casting an eerie glow onto the cracked pavement. The scene was unsettling, but it was what he found inside the car that would send a chill down his spine. A woman's purse lay undisturbed in the passenger seat, her phone still inside. On the back seat, a child's stuffed toy sat upright, as if waiting for its owner to return. There were no signs of a struggle, no skid marks, no blood, just an empty car in the dead of night, whispering secrets no one could hear. Stories like this aren't just bizarre, they are nightmares that refuse to fade, haunting the detectives assigned to them for years, sometimes even decades. These are the cases that defy explanation, the ones that burrow into the minds of investigators who spend sleepless nights replaying every detail, looking for the one clue that could crack it all open. Victims vanish without a trace, their last known steps leading to dead ends. Crime scenes tell incomplete stories, offering just enough evidence to taunt authorities, but never enough to solve the puzzle. And in some cases, the perpetrator is known, yet justice remains just out of reach, tangled in legal loopholes and chilling circumstances that make the truth even more unsettling. One of the most disturbing aspects of these cases is how they seem to leave behind a lingering presence, a feeling that something is still unfinished, that the answers are out there, buried beneath years of silence and uncertainty. Some say these crimes are unsolvable, but others believe that the right person, the right set of eyes, could one day unravel the truth. What happened to the woman on that lonely road? Who or what was responsible for her disappearance? And could the most terrifying possibility of all be that the answers have been in plain sight all along, hidden within overlooked details and forgotten evidence? Stay with me as we dive into the most chilling crime cases that still haunt investigators to this day. But be warned, once you hear these stories, you might find yourself looking over your shoulder, wondering what mysteries still lurk in the dark corners of the world. Because some crimes don't just go unsolved. They refuse to let go. Just hours before, Officer Mercer found her car abandoned on that desolate stretch of highway. Rebecca Holloway had been living an ordinary life, at least. That's what it seemed on the surface. A 32-year-old elementary school teacher, Rebecca was known for her kindness, her quiet nature, and her unwavering dedication to her students. She lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where neighbors still exchanged pleasantries and everyone knew everyone else's business. That night, she had left a friend's house after a small gathering, waving goodbye with a smile before getting into her car. Nothing had seemed out of place. There were no arguments, no unusual phone calls, no lingering signs of trouble. But somewhere along that lonely highway, something went terribly wrong. Her friends would later tell investigators that Rebecca had seemed completely normal that evening, maybe a little tired, but nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, a closer look into her life revealed details that painted a much more complicated picture. Just weeks before her disappearance, she had confided in her sister that she felt like she was being watched. At first, she had brushed it off as paranoia, chalking it up to the stress of a recent breakup with her longtime boyfriend, Evan Grayson. Their relationship had ended on tense terms, with Rebecca initiating the split after growing uneasy about his increasingly possessive behavior. Evan had not taken it well, bombarding her with late-night messages, showing up unannounced at her workplace, and refusing to accept that she had moved on. Had his obsession escalated into something more sinister? Or was it all just a series of coincidences that only seemed damning in hindsight? As investigators dug deeper, more unsettling details began to emerge. A co-worker recalled Rebecca mentioning a strange incident just a few days before she disappeared. She had been driving home when she noticed the same car following her through multiple turns, never getting too close, but never falling too far behind. When she pulled into her driveway, the vehicle had slowed down, lingering just long enough to send a shiver up her spine before driving away. She had written it off as nothing after all. Crestwood was a safe town, not the kind of place where people just vanished. But now, in the cold light of reality, those moments carried a different weight. Had she unknowingly crossed paths with her abductor that night? Or was her mind playing tricks on her, feeding into her growing sense of fear? And then there was the matter of the phone call. Phone records showed that Rebecca had answered a call just minutes before her car was found abandoned. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. The number was unlisted. Whoever had called her was either someone she knew well enough not to question or someone she feared enough to hang up on immediately. No messages were left. No texts followed. It was as if the person on the other end had only needed to say one thing, just enough to make her stop her car in the middle of nowhere and step out into the night. But what could possibly have been said to make her do that? And more importantly, who was on the other end of that call? As each new detail surfaced, the case grew more baffling, more tangled in layers of uncertainty. Investigators questioned her ex-boyfriend, but he had a rock-solid alibi, placing him miles away at the time of her disappearance. Friends and family racked their brains, searching for any clue, any offhand comment Rebecca might have made that could explain what had happened to her. But the more they searched, the more elusive the truth became. There were no security cameras, no witnesses, no clear suspects. Just a car, a phone call, and a woman who had seemingly stepped off the face of the earth. And then, just when it seemed like the case had reached a dead end, a discovery was made, one that only deepened the mystery and raised more terrifying questions than it answered. The case had already begun to sink its claws into the minds of investigators, but just when they thought they were making progress, the trail took a sudden, chilling turn. It started with the surveillance footage, or rather, the footage that should have existed, but didn't. Crestwood wasn't a large town, but several businesses along the highway had security cameras, any of which could have captured a glimpse of Rebecca's car passing by in the minutes leading up to her disappearance. Yet, when detectives reviewed the tapes, something strange had happened. The feed from the gas station closest to where her car was found was corrupted, an entire hour of footage wiped clean, replaced with static. The owner swore he had checked the system just a day before and found no issues. Across the street, another business had a camera positioned toward the road, but when investigators requested the footage, they were met with an unexpected answer. The hard drive containing the recordings had been stolen just 2 nights earlier. At first, it seemed like an unfortunate coincidence, until the lead detective received an anonymous note slipped under his windshield wiper outside the station. The words were scrawled hastily in black ink, short but direct: "Stop looking. She's already gone." No signature, no indication of who had left it. Just a warning, unsettling in its simplicity. Was this the work of someone who knew more than they were letting on? Or was it meant to mislead the investigation, to steer them away from whatever truth was buried beneath the surface? Either way, it only fueled their determination. But the deeper they dug, the more troubling details they uncovered, especially about Rebecca's past. To those who knew her in recent years, she had always been a quiet, well-liked teacher, someone who kept to herself, but never seemed to have enemies. But years before she moved to Crestwood, her life had been marked by something few people in town knew about. A decade earlier, she had been involved in a hit-and-run accident in another state, one that had left a man in critical condition. Though she had never been charged, there had been whispers that the case wasn't as clear-cut as it seemed. The victim's family had long believed that Rebecca had been responsible, even when the investigation failed to prove it. Had someone from her past finally caught up with her? Had guilt driven her into hiding, or had vengeance finally come knocking at her door? The revelation shattered the image of Rebecca as an innocent victim. If she had kept this secret hidden for years, what else had she not told those around her? Even more unsettling was the realization that the police weren't the only ones digging into her past. Someone had already known. Someone had been watching. Someone had been waiting for the right moment to strike. And then came the phone call. Not from Rebecca's missing number, but from a private line, dialing straight into the lead detective's office in the middle of the night. When he answered, there was silence at first, just the faint sound of breathing on the other end. Then, a voice, low and measured, spoke 3 words before the line went dead. "You're too late." That was when the investigation took a turn from frustrating to terrifying. It was no longer just a missing person case. It was a game, and someone out there was making the rules. The tension in the precinct was suffocating, a heavy unspoken fear settling over the room as the lead detective replayed the chilling phone call in his mind. "You're too late." The words echoed like a taunt, a quiet declaration of control from someone who knew far more than they should. But before he could even begin to dissect the implications, another call came in, this time from someone completely unexpected. Officer Mercer, the one who had first discovered Rebecca's abandoned car, had just received an eerily similar message. Except this time, it wasn't a phone call. It was a handwritten note placed inside his personal mailbox at home, even though no one should have had access to it. The message was short, deliberate, and just as unsettling as the one left for the detective. You weren't supposed to find her. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Rebecca anymore. Someone was watching the investigation itself, following those involved, anticipating their every move. The fact that Mercer had been singled out meant that whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to scare them, they were sending a message. But what did it mean? That he had arrived at the scene too soon? That there had been something there he wasn't meant to see? The unsettling realization was that if the note was true, then whatever had happened to Rebecca had likely taken place just moments before he had arrived. Had he unknowingly scared off whoever had been there? Had she still been alive when he first pulled up to that car, only to slip away before he could realize it? As if the case wasn't twisted enough, another complication emerged, one that threatened to unravel everything they thought they knew. Rebecca's phone had been missing since the night she vanished, presumed either destroyed or taken by whoever was responsible. But that assumption was shattered when her younger sister Claire received an unexpected text from Rebecca's number. It was just a single word, "help." The timestamp showed that the message had been sent in real time, not a delayed text or a scheduled message. Rebecca's phone was still active. Someone had it. But was it Rebecca herself, or was this another game being played at their expense? The message was followed by silence. No responses, no calls, no sign of where it had come from. But there was something else, something so small, yet so alarming, that it sent a fresh wave of dread through Claire's body. The text was written in all lowercase. Rebecca never texted like that. She always used proper punctuation, even in casual messages. It was a detail so minor that most wouldn't have noticed, but Claire did, and it confirmed her worst fear: whoever had sent that message wasn't Rebecca. With this new development, the investigators faced an impossible question. Was Rebecca still alive, being held somewhere and forced to send that message? Or had someone else taken her phone, deliberately baiting them into a trap? The discovery should have felt like progress, but instead, it only made the mystery more tangled, more impossible to piece together. And then, as they traced the signal of the message, another contradiction surfaced, one that turned the entire investigation on its head. The text hadn't been sent from somewhere far away. It had been sent from inside the Crestwood Police Department. The realization hit like a gut punch. The text message had come from inside the police department, the very place that was supposed to be the center of the investigation, the one secure location where truth and order should have prevailed. had now become a breeding ground for deception. The implications were staggering. Someone within their own ranks either had access to Rebecca's missing phone or was manipulating the case from the inside. And if that was true, then nothing about the investigation could be trusted, not the evidence, not the witnesses, and certainly not the people working alongside them. The lead detective, James Calloway, felt the weight of the revelation pressing down on him like a vice. He had spent years unraveling complicated cases, staring into the minds of killers and criminals. But this was different. This time, the threat wasn't some distant shadow, it was close, suffocatingly close. His gut told him that whoever was responsible wasn't just watching from the sidelines. They were inside the walls of the department, listening, waiting. And now, they had just sent a clear message: we are always one step ahead. That night, as Calloway sat in his office, replaying every detail of the case in his mind, an unsettling sensation began to creep over him. It was the kind of feeling he had learned to trust over the years, a primal instinct warning him that something was wrong. He turned toward the small window in his office, expecting to see nothing but the dark parking lot beyond. But there, in the farthest corner, just outside the glow of the streetlight, was the unmistakable silhouette of a person. They weren't moving, weren't trying to conceal themselves. They were just standing there, watching. His heart pounded in his chest as he rose slowly from his chair, his eyes locked onto the figure. But before he could react, his office phone rang, the sudden noise making him flinch. He hesitated only a second before picking up. Silence. A long, measured breath crackled over the line. Then, a familiar voice, low, deliberate, spoke once again. "You should have stopped." The line went dead. Calloway shot another glance toward the parking lot, but the figure was gone. The space where they had stood was now just an empty stretch of pavement, as if they had never been there at all. His pulse pounded in his ears, but before he could make sense of what had just happened, his cell phone buzzed against the desk. A new text. No name. No number. Just a single chilling image. It was a picture of his apartment door. His stomach turned. Someone had been outside his home, watching, waiting. And this time, they weren't just leaving cryptic warnings. They were making it clear that no place was safe. Not his office. Not his home. Not anywhere. He grabbed his keys and bolted for the exit, his mind racing. He had to get home, had to make sure no one had broken in. But as he peeled out of the parking lot and sped toward his apartment, a terrible thought wormed its way into his mind. What if this was exactly what they wanted? What if they were luring him into a trap, manipulating his every move like a chess piece in a game he didn't even know he was playing? And then, just as he turned onto his street, he saw it. The front door to his apartment, slightly ajar, the darkness inside swallowing the dim hallway light. Someone had been inside. Or worse, someone was still there. Calloway's breath was ragged as he pushed open the door, his hand hovering over his holster, every nerve in his body on high alert. The apartment was dark, eerily silent, but the air felt wrong, disturbed. Someone had been here. Maybe someone still was. His fingers tightened around his gun as he stepped inside, his eyes darting over the living room, the kitchen, the hallway leading to his bedroom. Nothing looked out of place, yet the sheer stillness in the air sent a deep, primal warning through his gut. He reached for the light switch, but before he could flip it, his cell phone vibrated in his pocket. A new message. "You're looking in the wrong place." A chill ran down his spine. He swallowed hard, his pulse hammering against his ribs. The text was simple, direct, and worse than anything he had received so far, because this time it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like instruction, like someone was guiding him towards something he hadn't yet realized. His eyes flicked back to his apartment, scanning every detail, every object that should have been normal, but suddenly felt like it carried a secret. And then, for the first time, he noticed it, the faintest shift, barely visible in the dim light. His bookshelf, which had always been flush against the wall, had been nudged just slightly out of place. His stomach twisted as he stepped forward, heart pounding in his ears. He reached for the edge of the shelf, bracing himself, and pulled. The heavy unit groaned as it slid an inch away from the wall, revealing what lay behind it. His breath caught. Stuffed into the narrow gap was a stack of old case files, dozens of them ones that shouldn't have been there. Ones he had never brought home. His fingers trembled as he flipped through them, recognizing names, dates, crimes. But one file, in particular, made the room spin around him. Rebecca Holloway. His hands tightened around the folder as he ripped it open. It wasn't the same one from the department. This one contained reports, notes, and photos that he had never seen before. And worse, handwritten annotations, scribbled in the margins in his own writing. But he hadn't written them. His mind reeled as he scanned the words, trying to piece together what this meant. Some of the notes suggested theories about the case, details that no one else should have known. Others, far more disturbing, were things he would never have written. Statements implying an inside knowledge of Rebecca's disappearance, implying that he had been watching her, tracking her, that he had known what was going to happen before it ever did. His breath hitched. Was this why he was being followed? Was this why someone was warning him to stop? He had assumed he was chasing someone else's crime, unraveling someone else's secret. But what if the real mystery wasn't Rebecca's disappearance at all? What if the real mystery was him? A sharp creak echoed behind him, snapping his focus back to the present. He spun around, gun raised, but he was already too late. A shadow moved in the hallway, and before he could react, a heavy force slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. The gun skidded across the floor, and a pair of hands seized him by the collar, dragging him upright. He struggled, trying to break free, but then a voice low, familiar cut through the chaos. "You really don't remember, do you?" The grip on his collar loosened, just enough for Calloway to take a sharp breath. He looked up, blinking through the darkness, and his stomach dropped. The face staring back at him wasn't a stranger. It was someone he had trusted, someone who shouldn't have been here. It was Officer Mercer. And in that moment, Calloway realized he wasn't just investigating this case. He was a part of it. Calloway's mind was a storm of confusion and dread as he stared into Mercer's face, trying to reconcile the man he had trusted with the brutal force that had just taken him down. His pulse pounded, his breath coming fast, but the look in Mercer's eyes wasn't rage or aggression. It was something worse. Pity. The realization sent a new kind of fear through Calloway's veins. This wasn't just some betrayal, some backstabbing partner caught in the act. Mercer wasn't here to kill him. He was here because he knew something Calloway didn't. Calloway wrenched free, staggering back as his head spun with questions. "Tell me what's going on," he demanded, his voice rough, unsteady. Mercer just sighed, shaking his head like a man carrying the weight of a truth too heavy to hold any longer. "You think you're solving this case," Mercer said, his voice low, almost tired. "You think you're getting closer to the truth, but you don't even know what you're looking for." He exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands over his face, before meeting Calloway's eyes again. "Tell me, do you even remember the night Rebecca disappeared?" The question stopped Calloway cold. He opened his mouth, ready to fire back, to tell Mercer not to play games with him, but the words didn't come. Because suddenly, for the first time since this case had started, he realized something horrifying. He didn't remember. Not fully. His mind raced, clawing for details. He remembered getting the call, hearing about Rebecca's car, the investigation, the pieces falling into place. But the hours before that, the night before she was reported missing? His stomach churned. The memories were fractured, disjointed like a dream that slipped further from reach the harder he tried to grasp it. He could remember leaving the precinct. He could remember drinking, No, that wasn't right. But something was missing. Something big. Mercer watched the realization settle into his face, then took a slow, deliberate step forward. "I didn't want to believe it, Calloway," he said, his voice almost gentle now. "But you have to ask yourself, why do you think you had those files in your apartment? Why do you think someone's been warning you to stop digging?" His gaze darkened. What if they weren't trying to stop you from finding the truth? What if they were trying to stop you from remembering it? Calloway's chest tightened as nausea rolled through him. No, it didn't make sense. He was the one chasing the truth, the one being threatened, the one uncovering something bigger than himself. But what if it wasn't someone else's secret he was unraveling? What if it was his own? The thought was unbearable. He shook his head, fists clenching at his sides. "You think I had something to do with Rebecca?" He stopped himself, the words too revolting to finish. No, he would remember if he had done something. He would know. But Mercer didn't let him escape the doubt. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black device. A recorder. He hit play. At first, there was nothing but static, a faint hum of background noise. Then came a voice. Low. Slurred. Calloway's breath caught in his throat, because it was his own. "I messed up. I messed up bad." His recorded voice wavered, thick with something he couldn't place. His fingers clenched into fists as his mind raced through every interaction, every moment where something hadn't felt quite right. The missing evidence. The texts. The files planted in his apartment. The distorted gaps in his memory. None of it pointed to a simple case of a detective losing control. This was orchestrated, precise. Someone had been pulling the strings, making sure he danced exactly the way they needed him to. And that meant he wasn't just a pawn in this game. He was the target. Before he could process what to do next, his phone vibrated again, the sound splitting the silence like a gunshot. Another text. No name, no number. Just a single line. "Meet me at Pier 17. Come alone, or this ends tonight." A cold knot twisted in his stomach. He turned to Mercer, whose face was set in grim understanding. "They're done playing with you," Mercer said quietly. "Whoever this is, they're ready to end it." Calloway's jaw tightened. "Then I guess it's time I finally get my answers." The drive to the pier was a blur, the city lights streaking past like ghosts in the darkness. His hands were steady on the wheel, but inside, his mind was a storm of possibilities, none of them good. He had walked into dangerous situations before, but this was different. This time, he didn't know if he was walking into an ambush or into a truth so devastating it would rip apart everything he thought he knew. The pier was empty when he arrived, the cold air thick with the scent of salt and rust. The faint hum of the water against the docks filled the silence, but there was no sign of whoever had summoned him. He stepped forward cautiously, scanning the shadows, his instincts razor-sharp. And then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. His breath caught. It was Captain Reeves, the man who had mentored him, the man who had vouched for him when others doubted him, the man who had guided him through the ranks of the department, shaping him into the detective he had become. And now, here he was, standing under the dim glow of a flickering docklight, his face lined with something Calloway had never seen before: resignation. "I was hoping you wouldn't get this far," Reeves said, his voice heavy with something that sounded almost like regret. Calloway's chest tightened. "You set me up." The words tasted like betrayal on his tongue, but even as he said them, he knew they were only half the truth. "You've been moving the pieces this whole time, keeping me just close enough to the truth to keep me chasing, but never enough to see the full picture." Reeves exhaled, shaking his head. "No, son. I wasn't leading you. I was protecting you." Rage flared in Calloway's gut. "Protecting me from what? From myself?" Reeves' gaze darkened. "From them. Before Calloway could ask who they were, footsteps echoed from behind him. He spun, his instincts screaming danger, but what he saw made his blood run cold. Two more figures emerged from the darkness: District Attorney Carla Novak and Chief Inspector Hadley. The two most powerful figures in law enforcement in the city. People who had built their careers on exposing corruption, on upholding justice. And yet, here they were, standing shoulder to shoulder with the man Calloway had trusted most. Calloway's entire body tensed as the weight of their words sank in. The people he had looked up to, the ones who had shaped his career, had been keeping the truth from him. Not just about the case, not just about Rebecca, about him. His mind rebelled against it, but deep down, something inside him had already cracked open, letting in the cold, terrifying possibility that they were right, that the reason he couldn't remember wasn't because someone had tampered with the evidence, it was because he had been the evidence all along. But Calloway wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. His pulse thundered in his ears as he turned to Reeves, the man who had once called him son. "If you really wanted to protect me," he said, voice low and dangerous, "then tell me what happened. Tell me the truth." Reeves didn't answer right away. He looked down, inhaled sharply, then lifted his gaze with the kind of exhaustion that only came from carrying a secret for far too long. "The night Rebecca disappeared," he said carefully, "you weren't working a case. You weren't investigating her. You were with her." The air in Calloway's lungs froze. Reeves continued, watching the horror bloom in his eyes. "You didn't kill her, James. But you were supposed to." The world tilted. No, that couldn't be right. But as Reeves' words settled, fragments of buried memories began clawing their way to the surface: flashes of a dimly lit motel room, Rebecca's voice trembling as she whispered something urgent, the feel of cold metal in his hands. A gun. His gun. His stomach lurched. He staggered back, trying to shake the images loose, trying to force them back into the abyss where they had been buried for so long. But it was too late. He could see it now. He had gone there that night because someone had sent him. Because he had been hired to kill her. The realization crashed into him like a freight train. His knees nearly buckled, his breath ragged as the full weight of it hit. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "That's not possible. I would have known. I wouldn't." "You didn't go through with it," Reeves said softly. "You hesitated. You let her go. And that hesitation cost you everything." Calloway's chest heaved. Rebecca. She had known something huge. And someone, somewhere, had put a price on her head. And when they needed someone to do the job cleanly, someone who could get close without raising suspicion, they had chosen him. The department. The people he worked for. The people standing in front of him now. "You were never meant to remember," Novak cut in, her voice razor sharp. "We wiped everything. Planted just enough evidence to keep you spinning in circles. If you had just let it go, you would have lived a long, comfortable life. But you couldn't, could you?" Her expression hardened. "You just had to keep pulling at the thread." Calloway swallowed hard, his mind a whirlwind of betrayal, rage, and something deeper: guilt. Not because he had killed Rebecca, but because he had been willing to. His hands clenched into fists, anger rising like a fire in his chest. "And what now?" he demanded, his voice raw. "You kill me too. Wipe me clean like you did before." Reeves' face twisted with something almost like sorrow. "It doesn't have to be that way." Novak took a step forward, her presence suffocating. "We're offering you a choice, James. Walk away. Forget all of this. Live your life like none of it ever happened. Or," her voice turned ice cold, "you don't walk away at all." A choice. But was it? He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. If he walked away, they'd bury the truth so deep that even he wouldn't be able to find it again. He would live, but at what cost? Knowing he had been their puppet, knowing he had almost murdered an innocent woman on their orders. Could he really go on pretending none of it had happened? And if he didn't? He looked at Reeves, at Novak, at Hadley, at the faces of people who had played him like a fool, who had shaped him into a weapon without him even knowing it. The answer came before he had time to second-guess it. Slowly, he reached into his pocket, their bodies tensed, hands hovering over their weapons. But he didn't pull a gun. Instead, he pulled out his phone and hit send. The aftermath unraveled like the slow collapse of a house of cards, each revelation bringing more weight, more consequences. Calloway stood on the edge of the pier, watching as Novak was loaded onto a stretcher, her face pale and twisted with fury. The bullet hadn't killed her, but it had taken her fight. Reeves sat in the back of a squad car, his expression unreadable, while Hadley stood off to the side, phone in hand, making calls that wouldn't change anything now. The empire they had built, the carefully controlled network of secrets and lies, was crumbling. And Calloway? He should have felt victorious. He should have felt vindicated. But all he felt was empty. The press swarmed the station in the days that followed, headlines screaming about corruption, about a hidden operation buried deep within law enforcement, about a man who had unknowingly been at the center of it all. His name was everywhere, his face, his story. Some called him a hero, others a traitor, but none of them really knew him. None of them knew what it felt like to wake up every morning questioning your own memories, your own choices, your own morality. The department issued statements, denials, carefully crafted half-truths, meant to placate the public, but the damage was done. Trials were set, careers were destroyed, and somewhere out there, in the shadows beyond the cameras and microphones, the real architects of it all were watching, waiting. Because for every secret uncovered, there were a dozen more buried even deeper. Calloway didn't stay to watch it unfold. He left the city, left the chaos behind, but the weight of it followed him like an unwanted shadow. He found himself in a quiet town along the coast, a place with no memories, no ghosts, lurking in the corners of his mind. He rented a small house overlooking the water, spent his days watching the tide roll in and out, trying to decide if this was what peace was supposed to feel like. Some nights, he slept soundly. Others, he woke in a cold sweat, haunted by the voice of a woman he couldn't save, by the knowledge of what he had almost done. But he was still here. That had to count for something. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He almost ignored it. Almost. But something in his gut told him to answer. He pressed the phone to his ear, heart already pounding. A pause. Then a voice soft, familiar, laced with something he couldn't quite name. Rebecca. And just like that, the world tilted once more. The line went dead before he could respond, leaving him standing there, phone clenched in his hand, mind racing with the impossible. She was gone. She had been gone for years. Hadn't she? Or had that been the final lie? The ocean stretched endlessly before him, dark and unknowable. And for the first time in a long time, Calloway felt the pull of the past, dragging him back toward a truth that refused to stay buried. He had thought the story was over, but maybe it was just beginning.